What's the biggest frick up you ever made that was fixed before anyone knew about it? I made a cake for work, and accidentally swapped sugar for salt. As I was prepping it in the staff lounge, I cut myself a small bite, and tasted it. It was horrible. People were already arriving for lunch, and being known as someone who bake amazing cakes, people were excited to have a slice. Not knowing what to do, I picked up the cake, and using all of my acting abilities, stumbled and dropped it on the floor, leaving a huge cake mess, but saving my reputation. Best part was, that the boss felt so bad for me, and perhaps disappointed at not getting any cake, that he told me to head down to the local bakery and pick up a cake. And he'd wire me the money, to cover the expense. When I was 15, I tried to bake a carrot cake, and I think I misread how much carrots to put and ended up with maybe 10x the amount of carrots you're supposed to make. Whatever I did, it became the mushiest cake ever. Guests were already coming, and in a stroke of genius, I told my mom's friends, since 2 of you are bringing your babies along, I made it extra soft for them. I also reduced the sugar and increased the carrots to make it healthier. My parents' friends kept going on about what a thoughtful, sweet kid I am, baking a cake specially with babies in mind. The weird thing was, the babies were hooked on the cake. One of the moms kept calling my mom for the next few months asking if I have time to bake that cake again. I did try to replicate it, but I just couldn't, so I kept pretending I was too busy. I met her kid again when she was 11, and apparently, one of her earliest memories was eating that cake. Her mom told me I was the one who baked it for her, so she was really excited to meet me, because in her memories, it's some mind-blowingly awesome cake that no cake has ever compared to. I had to burst her bubble and tell her what really happened. I used to work at a call center for a popular gift company. This one couple calls up and says we need to cancel our order. I look it up, and tell them UPS already has the order to deliver it. They tell me you don't understand. We are sending this to our son and his wife. We accidentally put his ex-wife's name on the card. It will ruin Christmas if they receive this gift. I was finally able to call UPS and get them to not deliver the package. Not my screw up, but dang. I am a veterinarian. The office I work at, it open 24/7, but there aren't many workers around from about 2 o'clock to 4:30 a.m. One night it was Christmas Eve and I offered to stay. I was there with 2 other people and it was about 4 a.m. The 2 others went out to get some coffee. I stayed back and watched the animals while they were out. There weren't many animals, but there was a parrot. A few minutes after the other workers left, parrot started screaming. It started making these hideous wailing sounds, so I went to see it, and it had gotten its toe stuck in the latch to open the cage. I opened the door to free it and it flew out. I chased after it, but then I lost it. It was being quiet, so I couldn't hear it, and it refused to come out. Then the other workers came back and I went into full panic mode because I had just lost a very ill bird that was supposed to go home at 7 a.m. Just as they walked in, I made up some bullshit excuse as to why I couldn't chat with them, and I went looking for the bird. Luckily it screeched again and I found it and put it back. Nobody ever found out, but I panicked a little when someone came into Doozrays a little later and yelled out, "Why is there bird shit on the computer?" Edit, thank you for the gold, kind user. Another edit, well, now at the beginning of my comment it says veterinarian, so hopefully nobody else will think I am a veteran. Sorry about the confusion. Last edit, I swear, I didn't perform the diagnosis, so I don't know what was wrong with the bird. I was just told what symptoms to watch for. It's possible that he was given a prescription by his actual vet and cleared to go home and be medicated there, or he was sent home to die in a more familiar place. Like when dogs get euthanized in their living room instead of at the vet's. I spilled red wax all over cream carpet when I was about 16, then carefully cleaned it all up using printer paper and an iron. You lay the paper over the wax, iron on low heat, and it transfers the wax from the carpet to the paper. What made it harder was that my mum, one of those really particular, house-proud people, was napping in the next room the whole time. Had to do all of it without waking her up. When we moved out, there was a tiny stain still there, but she never picked up on it until then. I was sending a porn link to my girlfriend and accidentally shared it to my Facebook wall instead of in a message. I don't know how, I must have been tired or drunk or something. We're talking hardcore lesbian anal gang rape porn here. I didn't even realize I'd done it until the following day. I woke up to a message from Facebook telling me their daughter removed my post because it appeared to be spam. The message contained a link and my heart almost jumped out of my chest and ran away. I don't think anybody saw it, thank God. I've never been so grateful to a robot in my entire life. Edit, here you go you filthy animals. Not safe for work. I accidentally sent a dick pic meant for my girlfriend to a group chat I have with my 3 sisters. Luckily my service went down right before the picture was sent. Was so relieved to see a message saying my message was not sent. Would you like to retry? No, I would not. Always growing up my mom told me not to overload the dryer. It was one of those fancy expensive ones and she didn't want it to break. For years she said this and I never took her seriously. Then one time after I moved out they had me house sit for a weekend. I brought literally all my laundry and washed it in a single load. Stupid I know. Ended up breaking the dryer. They were coming home the next day, Sunday. I went full repairman and took the entire thing apart, or at least getting the whole front off and getting into the meat of the thing. Turned out I snapped the band. Called everywhere and no one had the band. Ended up finding this random store downtown that specialized in washer and dryer repairs. Went in and bought a band similar to what I needed. Went home, put it on, and put everything back together. Took up my entire Saturday. It's been 3 years and my mom still doesn't know. He. Never tell her, too. Or any future problems of that dryer become your problems. Source, fixing computers for everyone who knows I'm better at computers than they are. SMH. Accidentally gave a tiny dog 10 times the amount of painkiller he was supposed to have after surgery. I was so freaked out when I realized and watched him like a hawk. He recovered from surgery just fine and probably felt pretty darn good to boot. Edits. No, it wasn't an opiate, more like doggy ibuprofen. He was just fine for several years afterwards, ended up being Pete's for other issues at the age of 16. It happened because I asked my coworker how much to give, she said 0.9, and I got it without double checking when it should have been 0.09. I had recently started working there at the time and have since taken over lead tech role and implemented a lot of safety checks to prevent this kind of thing ever happening again. If your dog eats weed, take it to an emergency vet ASAP. Not sure how we ended up on that topic. Finally, vets and vet techs are human just like anyone else and we do make mistakes sometimes. We do our best to give every animal the very best treatment we can and even the smallest hiccups leave lasting impressions on us. I feel guilty for every toenail I've ever quicked. Have faith in your vet. That reminds me of a story one of my buddies used to tell. I had this big ass dog, tough as nails and always wanting to fight other dogs. He wasn't scared of nothing except thunderstorms. It got so bad, his shaking and panting and shit during a storm, that I had to take him to the vet to see what could be done. The vet says that there ain't much to do except give him some doggy downers whenever his storm fright became too much to handle. So I get these doggy downers for a 90-pound dog and waited for the next storm. Well, there wasn't another storm for 5 months or so. The dog got hit by a car and died during that time, and I never thought anything about those pills. Then one night I am playing golf, drunker than Cutter Brown, and I twist my ankle trying to hit a sand shot. Ankle hurt like hell that night, so I took a couple aspirin and went to bed that night about 10 or so. I woke up at midnight cause I was dreaming about pirates eating my balls. And I needed to piss. But I couldn't find the bathroom door, so I decided to piss in the closet, but I couldn't find my pecker. So I just pissed all over myself and went back to bed. Anyway, the moral of the story is don't accidentally take doggy downers after getting drunk and playing golf, or you are in for a bad next morning. Not my story, but I think it's a true one. Not my story, my buddies. I broke my parents' car's front bumper. Then, they didn't realize right away, drove the car and totaled it. They never knew. I technically invaded Iran. I was serving in the Navy during the War on Terror, on my second deployment, and was in navigation. Our captain was a little eccentric, and he liked fricking with people. So one night he came on the bridge in his robe and fuzzy slippers and asked me to plot out 12 nautical miles from Iran, which marks the shift from territorial to international waters. My mission for the rest of the night was to ride that line, either to let them see us on radar just outside of their waters, or just to give me something to do for shits and giggles. So for the next few hours I was advising course corrections and doing everything I could to keep us close to but not inside that line, except for the little slip up of forgetting to account for drift once. Whoops. So for about 10 minutes or so the US Navy had technically invaded Iran's territorial waters. They apparently didn't notice, and I corrected it quickly. In truth, it's probably not nearly as big of a deal as it sounds. But at the time 21-year-old me was freaking sweating bullets, thinking I'd just declared war on a foreign country or something. Parents went out for the weekend. I wasn't a bad kid, so there was only one rule: no hookah in the living room. Easy enough, smile and wave, promise not to burn the house down, yada yada yada. I end up smoking hookah in my living room, which had been recently recarpeted. One of my friends goes to flip the coal, and I gave him a warning of how this was the only rule I had, and if he dropped the coal, my parents would never let me live it down. Plus I didn't have enough money to get my entire living room recarpeted before they got back. He nods, and goes for the coal. Next thing I know, the red hot coal falls onto the carpet, and starts sizzling a nice burn hole directly into the center of the rug. I jump for it, attempting to pick up the hot coal with my hands. I succeed in getting the coal back onto the hookah, but not before shooting a bunch of embers onto a floor mat by the door. The floor mat was a surplus section left over from the new rug, and luckily had the same wear and weave pattern as the area I had burned. Luckily, one of the friends I was with had a father who installed rugs professionally. On Sunday, George, who we now call the Carpet Whisperer, worked overtime on his hands and knees to patch the spot I had burned. A half hour before my parents got home, George finished up, and left me the burnt cutout piece, promising not to tell my parents. He did leave me with the burnt section he cut out, which I still have tucked away for a special day. Did something similar, dropped a hookah coal on the living room carpet and burned a dime-sized hole in it. I didn't know anyone who could fix it though, so I took scissors and trimmed some carpeting out of a little spot in a corner of the room and superglued it into the melted spot. It's still perfectly camouflaged and Mom is still completely unaware a good 7 years later. I was online manager for an organization about a decade ago. I was super tired and working late one Friday night when I screwed up and deleted their entire website. I threw up a "we're doing maintenance" message and spent the next 8 hours trying to find another copy of the code, discovering along the way that the organization did not have a single working backup. In the end I went to the Internet Archive and saw that some of the text was there. So I went home at 4 in the morning, slept for a couple of hours and was back in the office by 7 a.m. Sat morning. I then spent the entire weekend locked in my seat grinding away to recreate the entire website from scratch. Graphics, JavaScript, applets, forms, HTML, etc. 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 I walked out the door about 4 a.m. Monday morning, and then wandered into the office by 9 a.m. like nothing had happened. The only fallout was a slow stream of calls and emails over the next 6 months saying that my page seems to have disappeared, which I blamed on a succession of different made-up reasons. This is less a frick up and more a near miss. One time, before I knew shit about cars, my 87 truck overheated on the way to work. I pulled over, walked into a gas station and grabbed a gallon of water because I knew that when a car overheats you're supposed to pour room temp water into the radiator. What I didn't know was that it needs to not have been running for a few before you attempt to unscrew the top. The superheated geyser that resulted missed melting my face off by a cool 6 inches or so. Never did that again. The cap on the radiator doesn't say "do not open until engine cools" in large friendly print. Reading? Who do you think we are, Skolos? I work for a credit card company. One day our main systems crashed, so we had to use the old DOS systems to access the customers' accounts. So this lady calls and wants to reduce her limit from $3,500 to $1,000. Easy. But what I didn't know, since we were basically using a system created even before I was born, was that I was supposed to delete the old limit and then put the new one. So because of my mistake, the lady had for a very brief moment a limit of $1,350,000. Edit, as someone pointed out, it was not 1,350,000, but $10,003,500, which is even worse. That was 3 years ago, so my memory of it is a bit blurry. But I do remember the moment of panic I had. As for how did the system let me do it, simple. Our main systems do need an override from a credit analyst to be able to do any credit increase. CSRs can only reduce limits, not increase them. But not with that monstrosity of a system, apparently. I could basically do what I want with it. I was writing a religion paper for high school, and my mom really wanted to proofread it. I turned her down time and time again, but eventually let her take a crack at it. Thanks to her, I didn't submit a paper on the lion, the bitch, and the wardrobe. This reminds me of my high school religion class, except I didn't realize and my teacher got mad. It was a paper on homosexuality in Judaism and everything was professional about it, except I had to email it. I forgot I saved it homos and Jews. Still got like an 80, but man, that scowl on my teacher's face. Yikes. As an undergrad in college, I worked in a research lab for the school's chemical engineering department. My partner and I were making a reactor that could contain hydrogen gas. Hydrogen gas is the smallest molecule there is, which makes it very difficult to effectively contain. We made our prototype reactor and needed to test it to make sure it was sealed tight and could handle high internal pressure. To do this, we submerged it in a 55-gallon barrel of water and kept pumping air into it to see if any bubbles escaped. We kept filling it with air and didn't see any bubbles and wanted to know at what pressure it started to leak, so we kept pumping air in. It didn't leak. It exploded. Fortunately, the explosion was contained by the water, but all that air being rapidly released blew all the water out of the barrel and flooded our professor's lab. There was no drain in the floor in case of a chemical spill. You don't want that hitting the public water supply. So we had to break into the janitor's closet and got the entire lab cleaned up. To this day our professor still doesn't know about it. And it wasn't even the only time we accidentally blew something up or flooded his lab. And our project wasn't to design the reactor. The reactor was one component of the larger project. Late one morning, I was going 68 miles per hour in a 35 miles per hour zone. Saw the cop on the side of the road and pulled over before he could even start his car or get his lights on. Came up to the window, said he's never seen someone pull themselves over and that he wished I ran because that would be more fun. 30 seconds later he gave me a verbal warning and sent me on my way. Lucky shit. The day I learned how to take apart a VCR and put it back together again will be forever in my memory. I was 14, and like most 14-year-olds, any excuse to yank it is enough. Found my dad's porn stash, home alone for an hour, let's do this. After about 10 minutes of my dad's well-worn 90s bootleg porno, the tape decided to jam. Cue me trying to eject the tape and making things worse. Frick, let's just say the blood wasn't in my brain at this point. Grabbed a screwdriver and disassembled the VCR, carefully removed the tape without breaking the ribbon and wound it back so it looked untouched. I put the VCR back together and re-hid the porno so my dad wouldn't find out, and I never was questioned about it. The biggest kicker about it all is that my dad is no longer with us, and as an adult now I'd love to tell him this story as he would find it hilarious imagining me in a flat panic trying to repair a VCR mid-wank. Edit, thanks Reddit for making this my most upvoted comment. I can assure you it's a true story, and by the sound of it I wasn't the only one to ever experience it. I'm sure my dad is laughing his ass off somewhere up there. One day after a night of heavy drinking, I woke up to find I had shat myself whilst I was asleep. I was absolutely horrified, as you can imagine. I quickly showered and stripped the bed, taking extreme care to remove any trace. I was just finished when my boyfriend came home. He didn't suspect a thing. Edit, how awful, this is my most upvoted comment. Edit number 2, ha, this is more common than I thought. I was a terrible alcoholic but am sober nearly 3 years now, thank goodness. Much love to everyone. He could smell the poo-poo in the air. When I was 17 I worked for the city's newspaper, and one of my jobs was to add up all the orders for the next day's papers so they could print what they needed. Once I made a huge error and they printed off thousands of extra papers. I was very lucky, they covered up for me, quietly disposed of the extra papers and didn't tell the boss. I was just asked very nicely to never, ever do it again. I very nearly injected a premature baby that had Down syndrome with 10 times the amount of Lasix I was supposed to give him. I had put the decimal in the wrong place when I did the maths on the dose. That baby would almost certainly have died if I'd given it to him. I had the liquid drawn up in the syringe and had the syringe actually in the port ready to push through before I looked inside the chamber and realized how uncharacteristically full it seemed. Pediatric 4 doses of anything are simply tiny. I was supposed to give him 0.1 mls, and nearly gave him 1.0 mls. I needed a very large cup of tea after that. Edit, people are asking how this happened. Why no one double-checked the dose? That afternoon there was a couple who had a history of combative behavior and who had also assaulted a doctor 4 cots down who had come in to see their drug-withdrawing baby. They were yelling at the nurse who was taking care of their baby, and the woman who was with me said to me, "You were right with this, aren't you, Janie?" and hightailed off to make sure that the nurse was safe and to try and de-escalate the situation. The yelling and disruptive environment, and also because I was distracted by that, is most likely why I made the mathematical error in the first place. I did end up telling someone what happened after I had calmed down, and one of the upshots of this was that that particular couple was given a behavioral order for the special care nursery. Also, double-checking is in no way a fail-safe, though of course it can and does help. Thing is, 2 people will see exactly the wrong thing, and both think it's the right thing. A few years after this incident I was the victim of a drug error myself when I was in hospital, and I was given 20 times the intended dose of morphine. 2 nurses had looked at the order, drawn it up, came to my bedside, checked my ID tag, checked the dose again and then given it to me. Drug mistakes are an unfortunate reality of being in hospital, and people will always somehow get around the rules and checks and balances and manage to make them.